Hello everyone, this is Dr. Fox. Let's talk about the urinary bladder and urethra. In this video, we'll discuss the major surfaces and features of the urinary bladder in the context of the pelvic cavity. We'll also discuss its internal features, its innervation, and blood supply. We'll finally outline the pathways and parts of the urethra from the bladder to the outside world, noting any significant anatomical relationships with other pelvic structures. So let's begin with this medial view of a sagittally sectioned pelvis. The urinary bladder is a subperitoneal structure. So I can outline, there's the parietal peritoneum, there's the visceral peritoneum overlying the pelvic organs, and the urinary bladder is found below or sub the peritoneum. It is also intermediate between the pubic symphysis, where the pubic bones come together, and either the vagina or the rectum, depending on the presence of organs. The urinary bladder is a distensible organ for the storage of urine. It has several surfaces and external features. So its superior surface is found in contact with the peritoneum. And then there are two inferolateral surfaces on either side of the anterior aspect of the bladder. There's also a base or fundus, where the superior surface comes together with the inferolateral surfaces. We call that the apex of the bladder. And it's in the base or the fundus where we have the ureters entering and the intramural parts of the ureters. Finally, along the inferior portion, we have the neck of the urinary bladder, and that is in the vicinity of where the urethra begins. The urethra is the passageway through which urine is conducted from the urinary bladder and voided to the outside world. The internal anatomy of the bladder is really quite straightforward. This is an anterior view. Here we can see the peritoneum draped over. We can see the ureters coming down toward the base or the fundus. And where they enter, where the intramural portions of the ureters are, there are ureteral openings, and they are connected by a ureteric crest. Now, we can prescribe a triangle from those ureteral openings and crest down to the internal urethral meatus or orifice. And we call this area the trigon of the bladder. The trigon of the bladder is very smooth. It is not rugose like the remainder of the bladder, and it has its own developmental trajectory. So ureteric orifices and crest to the internal urethral orifice, and this smooth area is the trigon. The remainder of the inside of the bladder is very rugose, and we call these ridges rugae. So these are rugae of the bladder, and these are present in the undistended bladder, as it is an expansive organ. When it is contracted, these rugae form. Now, these rugae form because the wall of the bladder is very muscularized, and it is smooth muscle, so it is under autonomic control, but we call this the detrusor muscle. And detrusor muscle squeezes, and that is what puts pressure on the urine during voiding or micturition when it is expelled out the urethra. The urinary bladder has a variety of blood supply, and they all typically are going to come from the internal iliac artery through branches of the anterior division of the internal iliac artery. There are superior vesical arteries and inferior vesical arteries, as well as branches of other anterior division of internal iliac that can supply the bladder with blood. In terms of its innervation, the bladder is innervated by the vesical plexus. The vesical plexus is an autonomic plexus, which is a portion of the inferior hypogastric plexus. So inferior hypogastric plexus. The inferior hypogastric plexus is the clearinghouse of all of the pelvic autonomic plexuses. Now, the urethra is just a simple passageway that connects the bladder to the outside world. It begins at the internal urethral meatus, which is surrounded by the internal urethral sphincter, which is smooth muscle that is contracted to maintain continence or urine within the bladder, control of that. It passes through the urogenital diaphragm and it extends out to the external world and typically may be found between the glans clitoris and the vaginal orifice. That would be for a short urethra. Those are generally 4 to 5 centimeters in length. For a tripartite urethra, is typically 20 centimeters in length. There are several parts to it. First of all, a tripartite urethra is going to pass through the prostate gland. The prostate gland sits at the neck of the bladder. It surrounds the internal urethral sphincter, and there's a projection of the middle lobe of the prostate called the uvula, which is visible upon inspection. If the middle lobe of the prostate were to hypertrophy or grow large, that can actually increase the size of the uvula and occlude that internal urethral meatus, making voiding the bladder very difficult. From the prostatic part of the urethra, and it's that prostatic part of the urethra that receives secretions of the semen and sperm. These come up from the testes via the ductus deferens, and there are ejaculatory ducts that feed into the prostatic part of the urethra. But that prostatic part of the urethra then goes to the membranous part, which is the shortest part that moves through the urogenital diaphragm. And on the other side of that, the urethra is known as the spongy part or the penile part. Now we call it the spongy part because that part is completely encased by the corpus spongiosum, which is a type of erectile tissue found in the penis. The external urethral meatus is found on the glans penis at its distal ventral surface. And so that is why this urethra is so very long at about 20 centimeters. Now let's assess our knowledge. Which structure along with the ureteral orifices delimits the trigone of the bladder? Is it the detrusor muscle? Nope. Is it the external urethral meatus? Nope. Is it the internal urethral meatus? Yes. Rugae? Nope. Uvula? Nope. Internal urethral meatus along with the ureteral orifices and crest delimit the trigone. Thank you so much for your time, and it was a pleasure discussing the urinary system with you all. Take care.